Hey guys, how's it going? In today's video, I want to talk about using royalty-free loops and samples in the tracks that you're uploading to music libraries. And I want to talk about some of the problems that both music producers and music library owners are facing right now with the issue of Content ID. I got a few thoughts to share with you today on that subject, and I also want to give you some advice with regards to how much you're relying on samples in your productions. So just quickly before I get into it, I am running a 48-hour promotion for the master tier on the Production Music Academy. It is currently at 20% off. This is where I host all of my course content, as well as community access and feedback services all under one roof. That link is in the description below. Go check that out. That discount applies to either the monthly or annual subscription price. And yeah, go check that link out when you have a second. I'd love to have you in the community. All right, so Splice. Let's talk about it. The behemoth, game-changing platform that is Splice. I personally love it. I've been using it for years. I've got no problem with it. So it's funny thinking back just a couple of years ago, I used to work as an assistant operations manager for this indie electronic label here in Canada. And I would communicate with artists all over the world and help them plan out their releases and stuff. And I started to notice, pretty early on, as a Splice user myself, that I was recognizing a lot of the samples that I was hearing in these tracks that we were putting out there. In the electronic world, it's like, I mean, pretty much, everyone's using Splice. It's hard to get away from it. It's just so affordable and convenient, and the selection is amazing. And I think largely, Splice is sort of geared at people who are creating electronic music or hip hop. There's a lot of cool cinematic stuff on there as well, and some rock and some other genres, but mainly electronic and hip hop, I would say. So I often have people ask me whether I think it's like a good idea or whether it's cool to throw these royalty-free loops, whether they're from Splice or from Arcade or from some other company, in their stock tracks or their sync licensing tracks. I think at this point, like pretty much everyone is doing it. I know some people are like diehard against it, and that's cool. I think for like stock tracks, certainly I say go for it, but beware of the following problems. First of all, I'd probably recommend that you seriously limit the amount of melodic samples that you're using in your tracks from Splice and from wherever. Why? Because they trigger the Content ID detection systems on YouTube. I'm no expert on how these AI-driven detection systems work, but I do believe that they're quite adept at detecting melodies. And they're getting really sophisticated. Like, they can detect melodies even if they're pitch shifted or like time stretched. This is why I pretty much avoid like melodic samples from Splice, and I will just write my top line melodies with my own VSTs and synths. I'll admit that when I first started writing a lot of like lo-fi tracks, that I was leaning pretty hard on some of those like Splice samples. And I've definitely heard some of these same samples that I've used in my lo-fi tracks on other tracks in Spotify playlists and in music libraries. And yeah, to me, that's somewhat problematic. I think if you're getting to a point, especially where libraries are paying you up front for your music, it's really important to be delivering original material. So over time, my relationship with Splice has really changed. I'm always trying to think of ways to get really creative with the samples that I'm using, whether that means, chopping, pitching, processing, stretching, doing whatever, just breathing new life into them and kind of making them my own, rather than just importing a loop from Splice and then using that as is and building a whole track around it. When it comes to using like percussive loops and like beats, beat loops and stuff like that, I'm like pretty laid back about it, especially in like some like the hip hop stuff that I'm doing. From what I can see, from what I understand, I think that, the melodic samples are, causing a lot of the problems. I think that's probably the bigger issue and probably what accounts for most of the Content ID, systems getting triggered on YouTube. So I think, yeah, using Splice samples in your work is fine. I've never had any issues with it personally. The music libraries that I work with are all well aware that everyone is using Splice. But there are libraries out there that, if they accept your application, you can rest assured that they probably, some of them will ask you outright whether you're using royalty-free samples in your work, and if so, what kinds of samples are you using? Because they're well aware that, like, bogus copyright claims and demonetization are a big headache for their clientele, which are probably largely people uploading their stuff to YouTube. I got a rant about this, the Content ID issue, and the system has been a real issue for music producers on YouTube. People have been complaining about it for years, especially like beat makers, people who are creating like lo-fi hip hop, on their channel and or electronic music, and they're using, you know, these royalty-free samples in their work. Because what happens with these claims on YouTube is that, you know, basically YouTube just sides with the claimant by default, and it's sort of like a guilty until proven innocent, you know, system. So any claim that gets filed, you know, YouTube basically rules in favor of whoever's making that claim and puts the onus on you to file a dispute, and you basically cross your fingers and hope that it gets resolved somehow. Now, in many cases, these disputes do get resolved, especially in the case where these like royalty-free samples are in the crosshairs, but often they don't. And from what I understand, like YouTube doesn't act as a third party in these types of disputes, which means that the claim system is ripe for abuse. There's got to be a better way for the system to work. I really do think that YouTube should be acting as a third party in these disputes so they can effectively decide whether a claim has any merit or not. And I think that they do in some cases, but only for the YouTubers who are like, you know, really, you know, influential and, you know, have a lot of subscribers because, you know, they have a lot more influence and they can, you know, they can mention YouTube on Twitter and get their attention. But for like small level YouTubers, I think it's a real problem. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents on the issue. Maybe there's still a lot I've got to learn about the whole Content ID system, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to know if you are a music producer on YouTube that's encountered this issue with copyright claims. What kind of effect has that had on your channel? Has it ever resulted in a strike? Put your thoughts in the comments below and let me know what you think about this whole system. It seems to me like there's some room for improvement, that's for sure. Last little thought here, just to finish off this rant. I know there's probably going to be a few people in the comments who are going to be like knocking on sampling, and I really don't think that the problem is sampling. I'm well aware that there's music producers out there who want nothing to do with Splice and Arcade, and they're just like, no, not touching it. And that's fine. But again, I really don't think the core of the problem is sampling itself. I mean, like hip hop music, you know, was built, you know, on the art of sampling, and it is an art form. And I, you know, personally think that using samples in your work is awesome, especially if you're doing it creatively. I think Splice is awesome. I think it's a great resource for music producers. But I think the whole point of this video is just to say that, you know, because we live in this world where, you know, thousands of other music producers are using the same samples in their work, and also because we have these poorly designed copyright claim systems in place, I highly encourage you to just get creative with the way that you're using the samples. That's all I'm saying. Again, throw your comments below. A lot of opinions on this subject out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's it for me today. Thanks for listening to my little rant. And yeah, appreciate you all. And thanks for the support. See you guys next time. Bye.